everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dano, and if you're new here, I pretty much make any content that relates to architecture, interior design, and just creative fields. So for this video, I was thinking of ending the year of 2024 kind of on a fun note. So for this video, I kind of want to do a tier ranking for interior design styles. So this will pretty much just be my subjective input on, I guess, what styles I find interesting and just the ones that always come to my mind whenever I think of interior design. Some of these I've learned of in school, but also just through the professional world. So yeah, so also to start this video, I just want to say I hope that everyone had a very good time spending Christmas and Christmas Eve with your families, just having a great time. And if you were just celebrating with friends, well, I hope you still had a great time, and I love y'all so much. And also for New Year's, I hope that y'all have such a great time celebrating the start of 2025. But without further ado, let's pretty much just get into this video. Alright, so for this tier ranking, so I just thought to make it even more fun and have a little bit more personality, for each of the different tiers, I'm going to basically associate each tier with a different meme that was significant for 2024. So to start off, we have the S tier, which one of my favorite music artists, but also he just had such an iconic year this year. We have Kendrick Lamar. So I just have a meme just of him. Good old K Dot, love him. And then for A tier, we have Brat, signifying Brat Summer, of course. And at this point, it's gonna be Brat 2024 and 2025, so might as well keep it going, right? For the B tier, we have Kamala Harris. Just an exaggerated caricature of her, but this is also supposed to signify, you know, you think it just fell out of a coconut tree? Come on, girl. All right, so that's B tier. For C tier, this is another one of my good favorite artists that I love, but also her reign during the summer was here. It was pretty iconic, but you know, she kind of went out of style. But we have Sabrina Carpenter. Love her. Espresso, come on now. Plus, I'm a coffee lover, come on now. Then lastly, we have D tier. So this is kind of tying back to the first tier, or S tier, with Kendrick Lamar and his crazy beef that he had with Drake. So we have Drake as the last meme. So yeah, these are pretty much the different tiers, and I will be ranking each of these with a different meme and kind of just explaining what I think of each different style. And then at the end of this video, I will pretty much just put up a picture where it has all of the different styles. But for right now, it's just going to be on this board that I have created. So as you can see, this is a pretty extensive map, but we have a lot of different topics to cover. But let's just start out with, I'll just do a little random shake. I don't really remember where each of these are or which ones are which, but let's just do, sorry if you hear all the noise. It's gonna be, how about this one? So this one is maximalism. Ooh, okay. This one is kind of hard for me because I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with maximalism. I feel like I like it when other people do it, but whenever I do it, I feel like it's just too much. But anyways, maximalism, it's essentially just an amalgamation of different textiles and furniture pieces, especially if it's like eclectic furniture pieces, so it's kind of like a hodgepodge almost, but they typically still have some sense of like a reoccurring theme within all of the spaces to tie everything together. A lot of them also deal with a variation of color and integrating kind of like pops of color as well, but this can also be done with kind of like textiles that I was just talking about. So in these pieces here that I have shown, you can see there's differences of texture. So for example, within these cushions here, they're very velvety and kind of like suede, but they're also against a very high gloss finish of wood or paint. And then there's also different artworks, different frames, and that kind of ties in with the eclecticism. But maximalism also deals with almost like hobby-based collections or heirloom pieces, kind of like pieces that have a lot of significance to you in your life, but still tying everything together. But for maximalism, let's see. I think I might give her, I'm kind of torn between Kamala and Sabrina, so I think for now I'll give her a Sabrina. So she's going in C tier. Next, there's gonna be a lot of this noise going on. Sorry, y'all. I don't know if you're gonna be able to pick this up, but if you're wearing headphones, you might have to turn it down a little bit. Okay, let's go to the opposite side. Maybe, how about, ooh, okay, this is kind of along the same lines. Let's do Renaissance. So, I'm not talking about Beyonce here. Love her. Love that album as well. Please stream it if you haven't. Anyways, so with Renaissance, this is kind of like an early stage of maximalism in my opinion, but it also definitely deals with a lot of space planning and kind of like the early versions of floor plans. So this kind of makes me think of like the really old school, if I don't know if any of y'all have ever seen the movie Saltburn, but the house that they are in, it kind of has that feel as well. There's a lot of kind of like long corridors. They're all the spaces along the corridor are kind of like aligned. So it typically has to do with a lot of geometry and almost like armature lines, which if you're in architecture school or know anything about architecture like that, armature lines are essentially just like, they're kind of like grids that you create through different patterns that you see. And it's essentially a way of creating order, but also a way of aligning things. So it kind of has to do with some of that stuff. It also deals heavily with tapestries, textiles, different patterns that kind of intermingle. There's long and big paintings and wall murals. What else? This is starting to be like the time where a little bit of gilding and different materials are being integrated within furniture as well. So what else? I always think of like canopy beds as well. That's another thing that typically sticks out to me, which I don't really like canopy beds, but I know there's a lot of people that do. But for me, I just feel like it's almost like I'm sleeping in a cage. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different things that come together and tie together whenever it comes to Renaissance interior design. For me, it's not necessarily the best. I feel like it's a bit old school for me, a little bit too much. So I think I'm gonna give her maybe, some of y'all might hate me for this, but I'm gonna put Drake with her. It's not the worst style, but I can see the appeal that people may have with it, but for me, like I said, it's not really for me. Okay, let's do Japandi. So I haven't really had too much experience with this interior design style. However, I do seem to find a lot of the interiors with this style do appeal to me, and I think it has to do with a lot of the minimalistic, I guess, appeal to it or aesthetic of it. And it also ties with a way of living, so it's not necessarily just like, you know, an empty room with the boards on the bottom or like on the floors, but it definitely has a way of valuing imperfection as well as like the beauty of age, combined with warm and inviting atmospheres. So it feels very like natural and just home earthy to me. Now maybe that's the earth sign in me that just loves everything about that. But I don't know, but I feel like also with the minimalistic approach to it, I'm typically not as drawn to minimalism as much. So I think for this style, I'm kind of torn between. I think I'll give her, I think for now, I'll give her a, ooh, okay, I'm just gonna choose off an intuition here. So I'm just gonna say a Sabrina. See, close my eyes again. Honestly, it was so much fun, like, kind of pulling some of these images together and, like, the research behind this as well. I mean, a lot of this I did learn in or, like, not in high school, but in college. And it's just very interesting seeing it come a little bit full circle, especially with some of, like, the stuff that I personally work with and, like, my personal, or I guess, like, my own career path or whatever. I think I'll do boho. So boho or bohemian interior design, it kind of is like a mix of, I don't know if this will make any sense, but it's essentially to me like a mix of minimalism, but also I was gonna say maximalism, but they're like the completely different opposite things. But it has like a very earthy and like warm, inviting atmosphere typically with these interiors. There's a lot of greenery and plants and a variety of textiles and fabrics and different patterns, but they typically have a lot of color as well. So it'll kind of appear a little bit overwhelming at first. It'll almost feel a little bit cluttered, but I feel that due to all of the greenery and plants, and as well as like the soft lighting, it typically will provide an ambiance that's a lot more inviting and welcoming. So maybe this is also the earth sign in me, but I think for this one, I'm probably going to give her a Kamala. Gotta love coconut trees. Okay, so let's go to this one. So this is Art Deco. Art Deco is one of my favorite styles. I'm not gonna lie, maybe it's because I am an earth sign and a Taurus, so maybe I just like the luxury and the way it looks. Um, but I've always loved gold accents as well as like detailing. Um, what else? And some of like it's almost like a high-end look. And personally, it makes me think of like the era of like Great Gatsby and stuff like that, where everything's extravagant and over the top, but kind of in a simplistic and like geometric or modern way. Now, typically Art Deco does have a lot of geometry, so there will be a lot of straight lines. It kind of makes me think of rigidity a little bit, but because of all the high gloss and finishes and use of metals, it typically will kind of soften that a bit. But I think for Art Deco, I think I'm gonna give her a Brat. Next is Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau is another one of my favorite styles. So these two pieces here that I've shown are, whenever I think of Art Nouveau, this is essentially like the epitome of what I think of Art Nouveau is. It's very kind of organic, and for example, I'm sorry if any of y'all have trypophobia. I don't know if this picture will trigger y'all, but if it does, just look away for right now. But Art Nouveau typically has a lot of like organic shapes and curves, and it's typically derived from nature or vines, kind of a lot of different aspects of, I guess, the natural environment. It can even be derived or inspired by animals or insects, especially like insect wings, like I'm trying to think of like dragonfly wings, they have a lot of like those little kind of like intricate patterns within their wings, and they're very colorful. Sometimes they can be iridescent, but I typically will think of stained glass whenever I think of Art Nouveau, as even kind of like, I guess, structures that are metallic and they can be curved or bent. So this was essentially, I believe it was after like the Industrial Revolution that a lot of materials were being mass manufactured and produced, so there was a lot of invigoration within new construction or building materials, especially with interiors or facades, and just construction methods as well. So there is a big expansion in, I guess, the limitations and the possibilities of what materials can do and be. So I also really don't like symmetry within a lot of things. If I do symmetrical um, rooms or something like that, I typically will have still an aspect of asymmetry within it. Them to be more interesting when it is asymmetrical. I feel like symmetry is more of a safe way of designing, I guess. But um, a lot of things that I do find interesting with Art Nouveau is kind of like what I mentioned before, the organic shapes and curves, and especially deriving inspiration from nature, especially like vines and plants, and just creating movement. But I think for this, I'm tied between Brat and Kendrick Lamar. I think I'm gonna do Brat for this one. Now, if you want to think about Art Nouveau and Art Deco in a way that it's like chronological, I guess, Art Nouveau did come first, but they kind of intertwined with Art Deco in the later half of, or the later time period of Art Nouveau. But so there was still a sense of like inspiration or things that were derived from Art Nouveau, but they typically went higher with Art Deco. Next, let's maybe do, I haven't really gone to the bottom right, so let's maybe do, ooh, okay. So this one, this is Baroque interiors. And no, I don't mean like broke, like you're broke, like no money, but I mean like Baroque. But anyways, so Baroque interior design and architecture was created in Italy, and it spread throughout Europe, but also went to France, where the current king that was in power there, he ended up really liking it, and I believe it was one of his, I don't know if it was his interior designers or architects or something like that, but he basically had him create a lot of rules and rigidity when it comes to using this style and implementing it. So it was essentially like their take on Baroque architecture and interior design. But whenever I think of this style, I will usually think of like wall paneling and molding. What else? Maybe wainscoting a little bit, but, or even like balusters and staircases that are curvy in design, but typically they'll still have a lot of like decorative or ornamentation kind of aspects to the stairs. And there's also tapestries, and it also has a little bit of like use of metallic finishes or structures. So there's like bronze sculptures, chandeliers. There's gilding that is starting to be used as well, which is essentially where you apply gold or a metallic finish to furniture. And it was initially supposed to strengthen the furniture piece and provide structure, but it also provided like an aesthetic appeal to it as well. So of course the shininess of it, the allure of it. There was also a big use of symmetry here, but there was also a sense of elegance that was created through these detailing and decorative elements. They also heavily utilized painted ceilings that kind of had an illusion kind of aspect to it, where if you looked up, they integrated the use of perspective with it. So whenever you would look up at the ceiling, it was almost as if the things that were painted or the scene that was painted above you was in the depth and perspective that you were viewing it in. I do love this style as well, but I think the heavy use of wood kind of gives me a very dark aspect to it, which I don't necessarily like or know if I love. So I think for this, I'm gonna give Kamala. Let's do this one. So this style is modern style, and whenever I think of modern, it's essentially a big umbrella term for a bunch of different styles, because during this time period there was a big expansion and thinking, and as well as ways of utilizing furniture with different interiors, and there was a big boom essentially. This style, there's typically a mix of, I always think of like leather, like a vintage leather, kind of like steel or metallic finishes like aluminum or sometimes gold, but I feel like majority of the time it was almost a whiter appearing metallic finish like chrome or aluminum, but it was still typically reflective. There is a big emphasis on ergonomic furniture and the way that furniture and interiors should also help and serve the occupants. So a lot of furniture you'll see they'll look very simplistic, but it'll be in such a way that it's supposed to benefit the human, I guess, form, anatomy, and the way that we work and live. So if we're just talking about the strict modern type of, I guess, dichotomy, I'm kind of torn because I feel like I like a lot of different styles that are intertwined with modern, but they're not essentially just modern. So I think for this, okay, I might get crucified for this, but I think I'm gonna give Kamala. Ooh, which one are you? Okay, you are minimalism. So I kind of touched on this a little bit in the Japandi one as well, but with minimalism, I don't necessarily hate it, but I also don't necessarily love it. I feel that typically a lot of minimalistic interiors will strictly focus on, I guess, like bare minimum, like just the essentials whenever it comes to living and interiors. But that typically will come with, like stark white interiors with very little paintings, very little decorative accents. But I feel like when it comes to furniture, I don't hate it, but I still don't think it's like, I guess, anything crazy. Now, the one appeal to minimalism that I do like is that it is a sense of, I guess, a way of living, and it's more so a way of discouraging overconsumption. So it's a very disciplined design style, and it ties into a lot of different aspects within the occupant's life and just their way of living. So I think for this one, I'm also gonna give a Kamala rating for it. Because like I said, I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. So I think it also depends on the designer, because a lot of interiors that I see that are typically associated with like minimalism, I typically don't like them. But every now and then I'll come across one that I really do like, and that still has a sense of cohesion, even though it is, just the essentials. Y'all, I'm gonna ask y'all, where should I go? Mid-century modern style. So with this style, it is derived also from modern interiors. So this was pretty much within the time period of 1945 to 1975, and it was inspired by a movement in Germany called the Bauhaus movement. And the Bauhaus was, I believe it was a school of architecture and design in Germany, but there was a big movement there that happened, and it also tied in with technological advancements. So there's still a lot of elements that you will see derived from modern interiors or seen within other modern interiors, because like I said, during this time period there was a lot of different amalgamations of different styles and ideas and ways of designing. So it'll typically still have like a sense of modernism, but it will be I feel like mid-century modern is a lot more contemporary feeling. So there will be updated uses or forms and shapes of furniture and different fixtures. There will also be a bigger integration of lighting, and that looks a bit more decorative and aesthetically pleasing, but there's still a big sense and emphasis on ergonomic furniture and how it can suit, how the interiors can suit humans and occupants in the way that we live and work. So to me, I kind of think of this style as a little bit of minimalism, a little bit of modernism, and just a smidge of like Art Deco. So there's still a lot of sleek lines and geometries everywhere. There's a lot of, and this is also due to the ergonomic furniture and way of designing. So there will also be a different or a variety of different textiles that intermingle with each other, and these can also provide pops of color as well. For this style, I think this is probably, I think like I was gonna say the middle, but I don't know if I want to be crucified enough or like more because I already feel like I'm gonna be crucified for this. I think I'm gonna give her, oh, I'm tied between K Dot and Brat. You know, I think I'll give Kendrick Lamar for this one. That's the only thing that feels right now. So Kendrick, it's definitely one of my favorite styles. So that's probably why I'm having such a hard time deciding. I keep looking at you, so I think it's about time I do you. So this style is called Rococo, and it was essentially derived from a French word meaning, or that's called rocaille, and it basically just means seashell. And you'll see a lot of this motif and imagery within a lot of these interiors, and these interiors, they kind of feel like a sense of Baroque architecture and Art Deco to me, or even a little bit of Art Nouveau. But essentially there's still a lot of wall paneling and molding that you will see that was reminiscent of the Baroque time period. And in terms of chronological order, I do believe that Baroque architecture and interior design was first, and then Rococo happened shortly thereafter. So it was a sense of still having this rigidity and kind of finding a way to break out of that mold. So you will typically see a lot of interiors with, as I mentioned before, like wall paneling and molding, but they will be gilded, and they will also have kind of like a recessed piece, or I believe they're called reliefs, where they have murals within that recessed piece that's within the molding. And typically a lot of the imagery that's depicted here is, as I mentioned before, it has to do with seashells. There will also be a lot of curvilinear features as well as vines, and there will also be some mirrors as well in places. Most of the time, I really love these interiors. Sometimes it can be really extravagant and over the top. Personally, whenever I think of this style, if y'all have ever seen the show Bridgerton, that's what it makes me think of. It makes me think of like theatrics and very over the top, dramatic, but in an elegant and kind of like feminine way. There also is a big use of asymmetrical interiors, so there's a bit of a break from kind of like that Renaissance and I guess older way of designing where everything is aligned and there's too much rigidity. So for this interior design style, it's among one of my favorites. So I think I'm probably going to give this one Kendrick Lamar. Within a lot of these interiors, I don't know if you can see them in this. I don't think you can see it in this picture, but within a lot of interiors that are associated with the Rococo era or way of designing, it will typically on moldings or even on arches above doorways, there will be small sculptures of little, they're kind of like babies, like that have wings on them, and they're typically called, I think they're called putti, but they're supposed to represent kind of like an angelic spirit or kind of like profane love, I guess. But you'll typically see those sculpted above a lot of these reliefs and paneling and architecture. But I don't know, I just feel like it's very over the top and just kind of fun to me. So I also love that it's derived from nature as well. So personally, I already there's no other score that I could give it other than a Kendrick Lamar. So okay, so this style, I don't know if it's necessarily a style, but I have always designated it as one. But it's biophilic interior design. So biophilic interior design has to do with um, nature and the way that we can integrate that within designing and just how it can impact us. But also, it's a way of including greenery in nature to where it can benefit us as well. But it's almost like a symbiotic relationship where we get benefited from them, but they also um, get some sort of benefit from us as well. But with this interior design style, so um, I'll typically think of earthy tones, kind of neutral palettes, things that are like browns, beiges, whites, um, shades of green. What else? Typically, I'll think of interiors that have thresholds, or that's essentially just like um, kind of like pathways that will intermingle and have like a flow between interior and exterior, so indoor outdoor. um, they'll typically also utilize, because it's live greenery and live plants, they will maximize as much natural light that they can. And personally, I've always loved biophilic interiors. I find something very interesting about them, and it's just a way that it can benefit humans in a psychological and just like on a mental level. So I've always loved that aspect of it. And the use of different hues that tie back to nature and that we get inspired by, that is just something very cool to me. There's also, typically because you're integrating live greenery, there will be updates with materials, finishes, and construction methods that can still, I guess, benefit these plants as well. But typically you'll see like polished woods, sleek metals, stone, and a lot of the spaces will feel very contemporary and light and airy. For these spaces, I don't know, I feel like because it's, I don't necessarily see it, I guess, as like a design style, I think I might give her Brat, or not Brat, sorry, Kamala. So I'm doing Kamala because it also depends on the designer and I guess like the goal or aspect that they're trying to achieve with each project, because sometimes it can just feel almost like hodgepodge where it's just like kind of thrown in there and without, I guess, the secondary thought of it and like the way that it can impact us. Now, whenever we're talking about biophilic interior design or interiors, it is also derived from the word biophilia, which is essentially just a love of life and a living world, and kind of how humans have always had interest in other life forms in the way that they live, I guess, and just the human's innate connection to nature as well. So for this interior design style, it is Gothic interior design and architecture. So Gothic interiors, this personally, it makes me think of when I studied abroad and we went to Italy. I always think of the cathedrals there, and from what I remember in school, it is derived and kind of like it came up with the cathedral-esque interior design and architecture. So it had a lot of influence in structure as well as, or structural integrity, I mean. So typically whenever I think of Gothic architecture, I'll think of the vaults that you'll see on the ceilings where they're creating the arches. And these vaults were derived from Italy as well, where they'll have the Romanesque um, arches, which are the semicircular ones. But these arches, since they needed more height and wanted to create a sense of grandeur within, or all within churches and cathedrals, they needed a way to build higher but still have that structural integrity. So that's why a lot of these vaults, you'll see them come to a point, or these arches, you'll see them come to a point as well. And you'll also notice a lot of buttresses, which are kind of like the big arches that you'll see that protrude from the, it'll look almost like it's coming from the interior and then coming out to then touch the ground, and that's also due to structural integrity as well. So I always think kind of like a sense of awe and grandeur whenever it comes to Gothic architecture. They'll also emphasize stained glass and natural forms and natural light. So due to the high ceilings of these interiors, a lot of natural light will be reflected and diffused within the space. You'll also see a lot of repeating columns due to the structure that is needed. And for me, I don't know, I feel like it's a really cool interior design style. However, I don't know, I feel like I've never really used it aside from studying abroad in Italy and, sketching like the interiors and stuff like that, or the exteriors. But I don't know, for me, it's always been a bit too heavy and dark for me, so I think I may have to give this, I'm torn between Kamala and Sabrina. I know a lot of y'all will probably crucify me for this too. I think I'm gonna give Sabrina. It's just not my favorite style personally. It always feels too heavy and too almost like masculine, I guess. Probably due to the heavy use of concrete and materials and the darkness of it, I guess. Or like the heavy appearance of these structures, which I know is to serve a purpose, but I think for me it's still not the best. Let's do contemporary. So contemporary interiors, they make me think of mid-century modern, but in a more present sense, I guess, if that means. So it's typically updating a lot of the materials and construction materials, as well as finishes and furniture pieces. So there's a bit more of a starkness and, I guess, contrast whenever it comes to color as well as saturation. I feel like there's also a bit more curviness whenever it comes to both space planning but also furniture pieces. So due to the technological age that we're in, it kind of allows us more possibilities when it comes to creation. And by creation I just mean by furniture manufacture as well as fabrication, stuff like that. So for these, I kind of get more of like a cutting edge sense, and whenever I think of contemporary design, I think of woods, sleek metals, especially kind of like what you can see here on this table. I'm not sure if that's glass or if that's just like a high polished finish on a different material or a metallic substrate. But I feel like I really like this style. I just wish that it had a little bit more integration with color. But again, that kind of depends on the designer as well, because if you think to the definition of contemporary, it's essentially existing, occurring, or living at the same time, belonging to the same time. So I feel like a lot of people typically will get modern and contemporary a bit confused. So this is kind of a way that I dissected the use of these styles and these words as well. So essentially we have the present, which is now, and that can be a little bit confusing whenever it comes to modern and contemporary, because modern is consisting of now, but as well as extending to the time or the near time, um, before now or before present. But whenever you think of contemporary, typically I think of forward movement, what is occurring now at the point in time that I am discussing. So it would be the present and the near future. But um, essentially, it's still a new progressive way of thinking. So I couldn't really think of antonyms to like antiquated or ancient, which would be more relating to the far past. But whenever we think of the far future, that's more of like, I guess you would say just the future, or revolutionary, progressive, things like that. So this is just a simple way that I kind of try to think of it. So modern and contemporary are not necessarily the same thing, but they will also, in that same breath, they'll still tie into each other, since they both still occur within the same present or overlap within that. So for me, this style, I also love the use of structure, and depending on the designer and the interior or the builder, you will have exposed structure, which was very common within modern interiors and modern design. I don't necessarily hate that, but I'm sure we've all ran into that issue, or the times where you're walking around, say like a store or a home or an apartment, and you'll have a random column in the middle of a random like interior space, which doesn't serve any purpose, let alone just, or it doesn't serve any purpose other than structure, which of course is nice, but sometimes whenever it comes to the interior, it will, or interior space and circulation and the way of using these spaces, it can really impact that and even cut down on square footage that is usable. So for me, I think depending on the designer, I would probably, if I didn't have to account for the designer, I would probably give it a Kendrick, but because it intertwines into so many other aspects, and not every designer is, I guess, acutely aware of that, I would rather feel a little bit more safe giving it a brat rating. So it's still amazing, and it's still, there's a lot of possibility and potential within it, but like I said, it just depends on how you utilize that and I guess maximize interiors to benefit the occupants. I'll probably get crucified for that too. We switch back to modern, and I'll go with Scandinavian design. So this design style utilizes a big emphasis on eco-friendly building materials and construction, as well as ergonomic furniture pieces. A lot of the color palettes are typically like earth tones and neutral tones, and for me they give a sense of like Japandi, where it's kind of earthy, like inviting and warm, especially with the different uses of wood and natural lighting, and just like the simplistic sustainable building materials. But I feel like sometimes they can come off a bit stark and a bit kind of like jarring, but when it comes to furniture and I guess like the overall aesthetic appeal to it, I typically love them. So it also utilizes a concept of, I'm not too sure how to pronounce this, so I might butcher this, but I believe it's Hig, but it's basically a concept of spaces and lifestyles that prioritize calm and sociable comfort. But as mentioned before, it is also eco-friendly and eco-conscious. So I think for this style, I've always loved a lot of the interiors that I've seen in this style. Every now and then there will be ones that, no shade to this company, but it can come off a bit like IKEA-esque, where it's just, I guess, oversimplified and almost like a lack of, I guess, character. But like I said, it just depends on how you mix these interior, um, I guess, building materials and like the differences in wood species and stuff like that with, I guess, lighting and different furniture pieces. So for me, I feel like I'll probably give it a brat rating. Is industrial interior design. Now for this interior design style, I feel like a lot of the time, every time I see these interiors, I really like them. But sometimes, depending on, I guess, the way that you tie these construction materials together, because a lot of it has to do with construction materials and repurposing old spaces and retrofitting and stuff like that. So typically it'll already have very heavy and very materials that are intertwined with the structural integrity of spaces. So it's not that it's necessarily like bad or hard, but I feel that you have to tie together a bunch of different textures, a bunch of different hues. So for example, a lot of these interiors will utilize natural brick or brick that was utilized as the main construction material from a time period before. But because of the structural integrity and significance of that, you don't really want to take away that, and in some cases you can't because it's structurally sound. And if you mess with that, then it could create consequences that are costly and can even affect, the lives of occupants and owners and stuff like that, clients. But I feel that if you are able to manage and mix these different building materials together in such a way that it feels cohesive and it doesn't feel very overstimulating, then I feel that this style works a lot of the time. So I would say maybe like 80 to 85% of the time I really like these interiors, especially with the high emphasis on construction materials like metallic railings or finishes and fixtures. A lot of the fixtures tend to be very simplistic and kind of make me think of minimalism a little bit, but I feel like with exposed structures as well, it can typically work really well, and I feel that a lot of these spaces are appealing to me. So I think for this, I kind of want to give her brat. I think I will probably I'll do brat. Yeah, I'm gonna change the rating for gothic interiors, and I'm gonna give her, don't crucify me, y'all, I'm gonna give you a Drake rating. I feel like I like these spaces, but not enough to justify giving it a Sabrina rating. So plus there's just so many other styles that I feel more attracted to or that I gravitate to more. So I think as it is now, this is the final rating. So we have a lot of brats, as we should. And then I'm kind of surprised that I don't have more Kendricks. I thought I was gonna like a lot more. I already knew I loved Rococo, so that I'm biased towards. I kind of already knew that. It's just so dramatic and over the top. And me being a Taurus, I already knew I was gonna love it. The mid-century modern, I feel like I kind of already knew that too. But a lot of these, I don't know. I feel like I would give it higher ratings, I thought. But there is a lot of brats, so I guess I'll take that. But yeah, so this is pretty much the final rating, everyone. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I hope y'all had a great time reacting to this and just seeing different design styles and I guess what you're gravitated towards. But yeah, so this is pretty much my definitive rating for or tier ranking for interior design styles. Now, of course, there are a bajillion different styles within these subcategories of or categories of design. So do not take this as I guess like the end all be all, because like I said, there's so many even styles before Gothic architecture and interior design or Renaissance, and there's ones in between them. And because the world is so big and there's so many different cultures, there's different ways of I guess having your spin or your take on these different styles. And even now in contemporary designs, there is a lot of influence that is derived from these previous styles. So it's just a way of integrating it in a way that it doesn't feel outdated, but still kind of has that essence to it, you know? But yeah, so this is my video. So I hope y'all liked, had fun. Please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're ready for the next video, let me know down in the comments. Let me know if you had any questions or just start a discussion. But anyways, yeah, ciao y'all, bye.